Hi, everybody. I'm here. I'm back. I'm live. There's nobody here yet because I just started live, but people will see this. So hello, welcome. I'm really pleased to see you here. I am doing the second part of my video series on how can tapping help with money problems. And last time I talked about how to tell if you have a subconscious money block. And there's all sorts of red flags out there. We talked about how, spending issues can be an easy sign to tell that there's something inside of you that's causing the problem. But even making money problems, that can be harder to recognize, but it certainly can come from subconscious blocks. So if you're always making less than you could, or charging too little, or not raising your rates, or not asking for a raise, or holding yourself back from doing those things that would make you more money, that can be a sign. And there's patterns with money. If you keep having the boom and bust or the roller coaster with it, or if you have a money ceiling, you can make so much but never more. Okay, so all sorts of ways that money blocks show themselves, subconscious money blocks. So that was last week. This week, I want to talk about where do those subconscious money blocks come from? Okay, and honestly, if you have financial difficulties of any sort, what I found with my clients over and over again is that you can usually trace them back to old programming, a subconscious message or rule that's sabotaging your conscious plans for changing your financial situation. And you would think that our conscious, we're so used to think, well, I can just make a decision and follow through on it. But if you've got a subconscious block there that says, for example, there's never enough, you will find over and over again that you will have things happen that make it so that in your life there's never enough. So let me give you an example. So if you grow up in a family and you saw over and over again, you experiences that there was never enough money for what you wanted, maybe not for important things, for clothes, it was your family always struggled. And you've got this subconscious rule that there's never enough. Now you grow up and you're making plenty of money, but you never seem to have any savings. There's never enough for some of the bigger things you need in life. You might say, okay, well, I'm going to stick to a budget. I'm going to create a budget. I'm going to stick to it. And you get started, but as soon as you start to see progress, what's going to happen is you're going to do something to sabotage it. You might go out and buy a big ticket item, or you might just sort of slide away and stop following that budget. Oh, hey, Gina, good to see you. I'm talking about where money blocks, where subconscious money blocks come from. And so you could see where if you have that. Oh, hi, Roz. Welcome to you too. So if you've got this old programming that there's never enough and you can't follow the budget, or let's say you've got your own business and you can make as much money as you want with a business quite often, but you start to see some progress there, and as soon as it seems like it's going against that subconscious rule that there's never enough, you're going to do something. Maybe you'll back off your marketing so you're making less, or you will make some sort of decision in your business that pulls you right back. And often, for those who know law of attraction, this will make perfect sense. If you don't, go along with me on this, because I've seen it over and over again with clients. If you've got that rule that there's never enough and it's playing even though you're not conscious of it, and you're starting to make more money, and even that you're iron fist, you are not going to go over your budget, but something will happen out of the blue. The car breaks down and needs a major repair, or the fridge needs to be replaced, or something. I've seen this with clients over and over again, that unless they get rid of that subconscious rule that's been driving the show, it doesn't matter how strong their willpower is, they can't overcome it. Not that way. But you can tap and get rid of it. Hey, Laurel, good to see you. It's been a while. All right. Okay, so let me talk about where that old programming rule can come from. Well, quite often it's simply an explicit message that was spoken around you that you internalized, often as a kid. So if we've heard it, maybe you heard over and over again, oh, rich people are so greedy, or, well, we can't afford that, or money is so tight right now. If you hear that enough times, or with enough power behind it from important people in your life, you internalize it. And then that's what you're living your life by. So if rich people are greedy, and you don't want to be a greedy person, you're going to do what it takes to never be rich. Or if people in your family can't afford things, or can't afford what you want, then as you grow up and you have more money coming in, you're going to do whatever it takes subconsciously to not have the money for what you want. Okay? Now, those are explicit types of messages. It can also come from implicit messages. You observe something and then you internalize it. So an implicit message might be, you see your family lives in a small place, but other kids at school seem to live in big houses. I guess my family doesn't have a lot of money. Or the other kids are going on vacations to Hawaii or Europe or whatever, and your family is not. And you might say, oh, must mean we don't have money. So you might internalize this message, well, having money struggles is just what my family does, so that's what I have to do. Now, you should notice that you can have an implicit message from what you've observed that's wrong. All of these can be wrong. Let's just be sure about that. But your family, perhaps your parents had an approach to living that was like, we're not going to live expensively. We're going to have very modest things in our life. And we'll save a lot, so we have plenty to live on to retire in. But as you look around and compare to what you have to what your friends and other people in your school have, you say, oh, I guess we don't have any money. It might not have been even true, but when you swallow that message, when you put that into your subconscious, that becomes the truth for you. And as you grow up as an adult, you live by that, even though you don't want to, you don't mean to, you don't even often recognize that you're doing it. Okay, so that's the implicit messages. Sometimes one of those subconscious rules comes from a decision you made based on an experience you had. So, we talked about how being a child growing up and observing that could be a type of an experience. But let's say something happened, like you were told you couldn't have those expensive tennis shoes you wanted. And the kid, I've seen this with a number of my clients. The kid gets that message, you don't get that, or you don't get the bike for Christmas, or whatever it is. And the kid says, oh, I guess I don't deserve it. And now they've got this internalized message, I don't deserve nice things. I don't deserve what I want. And as they grow up as an adult, they make it so they don't get what they want. Because if they don't believe they deserve it, they're not going to allow themselves to have the resources to get it. So I'm giving you a lot of examples from childhood, but it's not always from childhood. These experiences can happen in adulthood. I've talked with a number of women who went through divorce. The reality is it's usually the woman who struggles after a divorce. I wonder how that plays out in gay marriages when there's divorce there. I don't know, but I doubt there's enough research yet to show that. But I can tell you, as women in straight marriages who got divorced, that it does not always, but quite often what happens is they don't have as much money as they're used to. They don't know how to manage money. They can end up losing it. And they can internalize the rule that I can't handle money, or I'm not allowed to have it, or something. But it doesn't have to be just women. Had a client who went through the .com bust. Remember back in the beginning of the millennia. And they had been saving so hard, and then all of those assets got wiped out. And they internalized a rule that was, anything I have will be taken away. So why bother? And more recently, we just had the Great Recession, which knocked a lot of people back. And so a subconscious rule could be internalized at that point, even as an adult. So, all right, so that's where these can come from. They can be from experiences, but they can also be, I mean, look, the messages I was talking about from your family or your parents around money, like we don't have enough, or there's never enough for what we want, or we have to struggle. And we've all heard this one: money doesn't grow on trees. Okay, so what do you make of those messages as you internalize them? It's like, well, that's my family, that's me, that's who I am. It can be messages not just about the family, but it can be messages about you yourself. Often from family, more often from parents. And it can be you're not good enough, or you don't deserve it. Some of those things that we were talking about. Sometimes these messages are unintentional. Like the kid who doesn't get the bike they want for Christmas says, oh, well, I guess I don't deserve it. The 7-year-old makes sense of it that way. But of course, that was never the intention of the parent. It was just that this year, the new bike that they wanted was not in the cards. I have to say, though, I have a number of experiences with clients where that message was intentional. A number of them they were not the favored sibling. So they internalized the message that I'm not allowed to have as much as my brother or my sister, because whenever they wanted something, the parent would make sure that their sibling had it before them or instead of them, or maybe even said it right out. Well, you don't get that. That's for your brother or sister. And it's harsh. But the thing is, that doesn't make it any truer just because they said it, but we take it in as a kid as true. And then we believe it and we live by it. We don't believe it consciously. I'm not saying that my clients came in and said, well, the truth is I just don't deserve it. But they had this subconscious rule that caused them to feel that way. So when things would start to look better, they would sabotage themselves, something like that. Okay, and I'm giving parents a really horrible rap. I mean, the truth is, I'm a parent, and I tell every parent, yes, we screw up our kids. We're going to do it. You can't help it. You do your best, but you're still going to screw them up. I had the loveliest mother and father that you can imagine, and they screwed me up around money. It's just, they couldn't help it. It was what they grew up with. So I'm not saying that parents are all bad or anything like that. It's just quite often that's where the message comes from. But it doesn't have to come from your family or parents. It can be from grandparents or teachers or coaches or the other kids around you. It can come from religious trainings or spiritual messages. I mean, if you think about it, who hasn't heard money is the root of all evil? By the way, if you actually delve into that one, apparently it's not money is the root of all evil. It's the love of money is the root of all evil. Kind of a different message there. But when we hear it in the simplified version, which is going to go in deep as, if money is the root of all evil, I don't want to be evil, therefore I don't want money. Okay? There's a lot of religious or spiritual messages like, I think apparently there's something like put not your trust in riches, or that shows up in different ways throughout the Bible, possibly the Old Testament. For being a Christian, that's how I talk about it. And anyway, and then of course that one, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven. Looked into that one too, by the way. And, if you hear that as a kid, you think, well, eye of a needle is tiny, tiny little opening. Camels simply cannot get through that. Therefore, and a rich person cannot get into the kingdom of heaven. Well, I guess I don't want to be rich then, because, I mean, that's eternity spent not in heaven. That's a bad thing. Well, if you look into it, turns out there was a gate was it Jerusalem? I'm not sure. Something back when. There was a gate into the city that was a narrow gate, and it was called the Eye of the Needle. So it was impossible for a camel to get through. It's just, you better have a skinny camel to get through. But in our current way of looking at it, we take it as, to get into the kingdom of heaven, you can't be rich. And if you're a kid, you hear that and you decide it that way. And then if you get older and you get more sophisticated and you think about it, it's like, no, that doesn't make sense. And you just heard me say that about the whole eye of the needle is really a gate. That probably is not enough to get you past a subconscious rule that I can't be wealthy or I will go to hell or something like that. It's simply too ingrained, too embedded from long ago. Okay. And then you'll hear from people money isn't spiritual, or say an artist. Artists are supposed to struggle. Artists don't have a lot of money. Their mind is not on such things. So again, it can be like the role that you want to play doesn't match with having money coming in. And so there's, with that disconnect, something inside you will always push away the money. But it doesn't have to come that way either. It can come from messages from the community that money's bad. So one example, I have a couple of clients who grew up in communist cultures. So in Eastern Europe and Russia, back in the old Soviet Union days. And so they would go out and they would see posters literally on the wall, or paint on the wall, on the walls of buildings, saying things like, in effect, "Don't be a capitalist pig." And that's my way of explaining it. You know, but basically they were saying, we are all in this together, and we are all taking care of each other, and no one's going to be ahead of anybody else. Okay, and then they internalized it, and now they come to the Western world, and they're seeing that there's other ways of being, and that they can help so many more people if they have lots of money, and yet they're still being held back and losing money and preventing themselves from getting more money because of that old rule, and we just have to get rid of it. Now, you don't have to have grown up in a communist country to get that kind of a message. I have a client who, as an adult, moved to Portland, Oregon. And there's a really strong ethic in that city around everyone having enough, about no one having too much. And, you know, there are some wealthy people there. I'm not saying there aren't, but there's such a, it's, at least in the cultures my client moved in, such a strong message about, well, you don't want to have more than anybody else, do you? And so that goes in powerfully. Like, okay, no, I don't want to hurt anyone by my having more money. And again, logically, it doesn't make sense. If you have more money, you can help homeless people. You can help somebody, give them a job or whatever it is. But this isn't a logical thing. These subconscious rules, they are going to run whether you're consciously or not. They're just going to be there. Okay, so that's messages from the community. You can also get them from the media. If you think about it, when I was growing up, there were some great shows with some really nasty rich people in them. If you think about it, JR in the TV show Dallas, or Alexis in the show Dynasty, neither of which I ever really watched. Just let me be clear about that. But I heard about them. Even I had heard about them, even though I didn't watch those shows. And they were just nasty people. You wouldn't want to be like them, so you wouldn't want to be rich. If you're a kid, you're going to internalize that rule. Then there's Mr. Burns in The Simpsons, which, yes, I did watch. And Mr. Burns was really wealthy and really nasty. And who wants to be like that? And the man had no friends. Well, he had the one guy who worked for him, but nobody liked Mr. Burns. I don't want to be Mr. Burns, so I shouldn't be wealthy, right? It comes up in movies. I mean, if you go far enough back, you've got Mr. Potter in It's a Wonderful Life, the guy who steals the money from the other bank, from Jim. How could you steal from Jimmy Stewart? But anyway, so there's Mr. Potter. There's the Malfoys in the Harry Potter books and movies. There's, if you think about Hunger Games, you've got those defiant, poor, struggling, versus those dissolute, nasty, rich people in the cities who are setting kids to kill each other. I mean, that's a pretty clear distinction there. And then, Slumdog Millionaire has a similar kind of, you got your poor heroes, and to get any money, they have to join with the criminal, rich, nasty, murderous folks. It's just, it is a common theme in media. And when we're younger, we can take that stuff in whole cloth without having any sort of filters on it. And once you've got something like that in you, running the show subconsciously, no amount of willpower or logic can fully get beyond them. I've tried, and a lot of people will say that, I know where this is coming from. I tried. But in fact, what I found, the only thing I found is that tapping will release them, and you have to dig them up and tap to get rid of them. At least that's the thing that I found that works the best. There are undoubtedly other ways to get rid of those, but for me, tapping is so clear and easy and quick to do it. It can be quick. It can be a single session. But I'm speaking relatively speaking. If you've spent years struggling against this stuff and it takes you a year to get rid of it completely, that's pretty quick versus the decades you lived with it. I've had people get rid of these kinds of subconscious rules in a session. I've had people who have had a number of different rules, and it took longer, a few months. It depends on the person, but it's still, you can start to see some relief from it sooner than anything else I've found. So that's where we are. That's the sources I have found for these money blocks come from those different areas. A lot of it from family, and a lot from parents, but not solely. And often, I should say, one person will have more than one money block that comes from different sources. And you can take care of one block, and then you got another one to deal with, and take care of that one, and there's a third or fourth. Sometimes it's just one, though. I had a client who had a block around what it turned out was they had a stepfather who had told her that she'd never amount to anything. And then she grew up, she's going to prove him wrong. She had her own business, and it was really going great. The problem was she was never sending out the bills. And so her checking account was literally never amounting to much. So we just had to tap on all those, well, not all of them, but some of those experiences with that stepfather saying that to her. Tapped, released him, and that was it. That's all it took. And then she could send out those bills and have her business take off. And so those are, I could tell stories from now to the end of time, but I won't. But does anyone have any questions about this? Like, where would a money block around something or other come from? I've given you sort of the broad brush descriptions of the kinds of places it comes from. But if you've got any questions around that, please let me know. I'm going to be talking next week. I'll give you some time to type on that, but I'm going to be talking next week about how you can use tapping to get rid of those kinds of money blocks. Give some examples, give some different techniques within tapping that you can use. But I want to be able to answer people's questions. So if you've got questions around money blocks, shoot them my way. And when I'm done with this, I'm going to go back to talking just basically about tapping and other things in tapping that might be useful. So if you've got questions that are outside of the money realm, but still you want to know some things about tapping, let me know. Give me a message here, a comment, or you can direct message me, of course. Or you can email me, Nancy@unblockresults.com. And I will do my darndest to answer those questions in one of these Facebook Lives. But I hope to see everyone next Monday. Same bad time, same bad place. It's 2 p.m. Pacific time, which is my time. East Coast time would be 5 p.m. on Mondays. And if you're somewhere in the middle or outside of those, I'll let you do the math. Okay? I don't know what time zone Hawaii is. I just can't do that. And Europe, it's tough. So Gina, curious how come we internalize some messages versus others? Well, that is actually quite interesting. And different people will internalize different things. You can see that in families. Some kids will have one message and some kids will have another one around money even. I think one way you can look at that is if you have an experience that's quite emotional, maybe even traumatic around money, that would be a reason why you might internalize it, whereas somebody else who didn't have that same experience doesn't internalize the message. I also think it can be around just sort of the drip, drip, drip. My mother, who was a wonderful person, truly believed that she was always going to struggle with money, and it was just, and she saw it everywhere. There's never enough. You can't have enough, and I heard that from her often, and I loved her, and of course I was going to listen to her, and so that wasn't a traumatic thing, but it was still a very emotional thing. So so you can see how that might work. And I think there are some people who react, like I'm just not going to, and they'll put up the wall to the no, I'm not gonna have trouble with money, but then they might have something else happen because it's gone in a way that doesn't prevent them from making money and having money, but they've internalized something else as a problem with it. So anyway, that's my best guess on why some of us internalize a message and some don't. I guess I have one more thought on that. I mean, there are some people who are much more, they think harder. They're more, I think hard is the wrong word, but they're more sensitive to things. And so if they don't get the bike for Christmas, so sensitive, they're looking for the reason why it must be I did something wrong, I'm a bad person, I don't deserve it. Whereas you might have the same setup with somebody else who's just like, oh, I didn't get it this year, maybe I'll get it next year, that's fine. Because they're not looking for the reason why it happened to them and not to somebody else. So it can be the person, how do they take something, or how do they take what they've heard? It can be is it a traumatic event that makes it go in? It can be who told me this? Do I trust them? Do I believe them? Especially as a child. So thanks, Gina. That makes sense. So okay. Any other questions before I head off here? I'll give you a couple seconds. So again, come back next week, next Monday, and see the Facebook Live on how to tap to get rid of some of these kinds of money blocks. If you want to see previous videos, especially last week's, which is how do you recognize when you have subconscious money blocks? They're all saved on my Facebook site, Nancy.Linneruth. And the funny thing is I went to look at them and I put all these nice titles on them and descriptions for them, and they're not there. It's just the picture. So I don't know what to say. But the more recent ones I think are at the top of the page. So that's where you would find last week's. I hope to see everyone next week. And in the meantime, happy tapping, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.